Hi, I'm Fred Brack, webmaster for the Audio Description Project, and you're about to hear another episode of the Know Your Narrator series.
Today we have voice talent Toni Gannon joining us. Thanks for joining us, Toni.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's jump right in. What do you love about audio description?
There are so many things that I love about audio description. One of the things that I love so much about it is the detail. One of my jobs before I started doing audio description, I was a writer-producer before I became a voiceover talent, and I've worked in promos, commercials, narration, but I've always loved the art of the story, and I've always written stories. And I grew up loving books or records on, a soundtrack with a record and getting lost in something that I could hear and kind of create with my mind more so than watching something that's on the screen. One of the things that I love so much about audio description is you are helping somebody that either has lost their sight or never had sight. You're allowing them to have an opportunity to not just listen to the words, but to be able to bring in their, whether it's their memory or getting lost in the detail. You can really kind of create this amazing, incredible, rich foundation and landscape in your head that you might not get if you were watching a movie. For example, you know how a smell can kind of bring you back in time and it transports you to a time or a place, and words can do that as well. For example, if I'm narrating something, the gentleman walked into the room, sat in the leather chair and pulled his glasses out of his old flannel shirt. You may remember a relative that you loved that had an old flannel shirt. So whether you can kind of picture that memory in your head, the way that it felt or the way that it smelled, it adds an extra detail into the story that you can kind of keep with you as you're listening to the story. So I love being able to help people associate either a memory, breathe a little bit of life into the story with these elements as you're describing it. So I think that it also allows people to be engaged when they may not have had the opportunity to in the past with listening to movies or TV shows without having the ability to see.
Let's go back to the getting lost. That used to be an insult. Get lost, but you're describing it in a way it's an immersive experience. I'd imagine in your experiences in promo or commercial or even audiobooks, those get lost moments that you had as a consumer, you're able to share with our audio description audiences. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Getting lost in something with me, you're adding different things. You're finding a way to imagine something in another way other than what is being presented to you, whether it's turning something on its side or putting a hat on it and figuring out this great new way to look at something that somebody who has sight may not be able to catch the first or second or third time around. And I really appreciate being able to provide something like that to people. And I think that's very important. Like I said before, the smell, your emotions and what you can imagine while you're listening to a story just heightens things, and it brings in emotions, and you're bringing in your own personal experience, and you're getting lost, and you're creating this amazing landscape that is in front of you, and your story is going to unfold. The story that you're listening to is going to kind of unfold and intertwine with your own story and your own memory, and you may appreciate that story or that audiobook or something that much more than if you were to say, watch it on TV.
And that bringing into the story, it sounds like your experience as a talent, that you've crafted your storytelling talents to be able to bring someone in.
I've definitely tried. I'm a very expressive person, very, very, very expressive person naturally. So if I'm telling a story, my hands are going, my smile is going. I'm like a Muppet. I'm like a human Muppet. So my eyes are always going, I'm moving around, I'm dancing. So to have the opportunity to be able to kind of bring that in, it really means something. It's a challenge with descriptive audio to rein it in and to be able to tell that story and not try to become the star of the show that you are explaining to somebody, because I don't want to take over the story that has already been beautifully crafted. I just want to help somebody understand the different levels or the other things that are part of the story that you may not necessarily be able to see or pick up on. It's been interesting for me to be able to tell that story in audio description as opposed to telling a story, whether I'm acting something out or I'm explaining it on a different platform. So it's trying to figure out a way to rein it in, to change my voice, to change the nuance, to change everything about it. It's so funny when you're working in audio description, if you're telling a story, you're narrating for drama, you put a drop of drama in your voice. You don't add a cup of drama into it. But if you're telling something, if you're doing audio description with comedy, you're adding a drop of comedy. You're putting a smile in your voice, but you're not like, and the puppy, ba, 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 ba. And it's like, all right, you got to calm down. So that's something that I've been working on for a while. The enthusiasm is always there. You just always kind of have to rein it in and make sure that whatever you're saying is appropriate, that doesn't steal the show or oversell whatever you're saying.
It's a really great nuance with the enthusiasm being reined in. I think there's a misconception that if you would be able to address this, that
Sure.
by reining in your enthusiasm, it's not that the enthusiasm isn't there, it's just very decisively and strategically doled out. Is that a fair, what's your experience?
Absolutely. I agree with that. You have to, your emotions are always there. You are always telling the story appropriately with your voice, but you're not taking over. So I was working several years ago, and I was working with NBC Universal, and I had a bunch of dramas that I was doing for them. And I was very, very, very new to audio description at the time. I remember I was one of my first episodes that I was doing, one of the detectives was being chased, and it was a very tense scene. And as I'm telling the story, my voice is getting tighter, and I'm starting to read the words, and it was just like I was stopped, and it's like, you're not a reporter on the scene. You've got to, you're telling the story. You can't, you're invested, but you're not reporting live from the scene of, whichever show it is, so you have to emote while making sure that you're not taking over. And I hope that I'm making sense with the way that I've explained that.
It's really a nuanced conversation.
It is.
Your experience in promo and commercial and audiobooks. Can you share how some of those skills have been used in audio description or maybe avoided in audio description?
We're not sell with audio description. I'm not going to tell you about what's happening Saturday at 8 p.m. and wow, that's wonderful. And so that's one of the things that you're not selling with audio description. The people are already there. They don't need you to sell. They've bought the movie ticket or they're already watching the show. They're already invested. You're just helping them along. The way that I position my face so that I'm not plosive city, my P's aren't popping, and the way that you have to deliver your lines and the way that you have to sit and your body composition with narration, not necessarily with promos, because that's usually a very, quick 15, 30 seconds and you're out, but working on narration or a longer type of voiceover, you have to learn how to position yourself. You have to learn to, you can't swing around because your voice is going to change if you move your position. So that has always been something that has helped me. But there are a lot of things that I've learned doing voiceovers, pronunciation. There are several things that I've learned to pick up on in the past working on, promos, whether, you don't want to say somebody's name incorrectly. You learn your pronunciations beforehand. You learn everything that you need to know about the product before you get in front of the mic, because you don't want to make a mistake and have it go to air or have to go back in a series and re-record somebody's name 78 times and make sure that your tone matches and make sure that you don't miss a beat. So being prepared is something that I've always learned. The way that you have to hold your body and the way that you have to speak. You are an instrument when you're getting in front of that microphone. So that's something that I've learned. I don't play when I do audio description. You get a chance to play. You get a chance to read different lines in a different way when you're working with promos or you're working with narration or you're doing commercials. You can give several different reads. Or at least the work that I've done, if you do that, you're just wasting the producer's time, the audio engineer's time. You're there to do a job and you're there to do it well. And you want to make sure that everything that you're doing is clear and concise and very succinct. And you always want to stay true to the script. Interestingly enough, it's so funny. In my downtime, I wrote several audio description scripts. And as a writer, that was quite an experience as well. And one of the things that I learned is it's so different to write for audio description than it is to write for whether it's TV or comedy or working on a sketch, because you have to really rethink the way that you are delivering lines. I can hear somebody laugh. So why am I going to say she laughs? No, am I going to say she smirked or she threw her head back and she slapped her knee? You have to find out ways to explain something that somebody can't hear. Why am I going to say, she laughed or she screamed? We know that she's laughing. We know that she's screaming. You have to figure out a new way to explain things. And a lot of writers take for granted that if they say something or they write something that somebody can hear, that's kind of their job is done. But with audio description, your job is not done as a writer just to say, she laughed, she screamed, he yelled. We hear that, we know that, but it's our job as a writer to figure out a way to deliver how, so that somebody who cannot see can understand the emotion behind the scream or the laugh or the yell. So a smirk is very different than throwing your head back and laughing. An emotion will make you do one thing rather than the other. And that is something that once you have that detail, it helps you understand the character so much more. So it's up to us as writers, as well as the audio description narrators, to make sure that those are the details that get included. And those are so much more important than the other things that you would just write normally. So that's something that I have so much respect for these writers that sit down and they go over the scripts and they understand. Also, syllables and seconds. I'm a very descriptive person, as you can tell. Being succinct and being able to get that information in there in that very short amount of time that you have before the dialogue picks back up or the music picks back up, that's also an art form. So you have to make sure that you're explaining it correctly in a short amount of time and not losing the person's focus, because they're listening to you ramble on about, whatever the thing is that you're describing. And, we're 2 or 3 seconds into the person's next line. And it's like, wait, what happened? What happened? What did I miss? So you have to be very respectful of what has already been created within the show or the movie or the special, the comedy special, anything. So it's working within different parameters that you wouldn't necessarily have to work in as a regular writer. And I think it's the writers that get to do this. I just, hats off, tipping my hat, because they're amazing.
You mentioned that as you started writing audio description, that you started rethinking writing. I'm wondering about the other direction. Has audio description writing affected your other writing?
Yes. I always look for the cleanest way to explain something. I grew up in a home where if we went to the store to buy a gallon of milk, the story to buy a gallon of milk included what the clouds looked like, the puppy's spots that was, on the sidewalk when I walked into so there are so many different details that you think are important to get to the story, but are not really important. So you learn to extract, you learn to get to the meat of what the story is. Pepper in the important details, but not flood the story with every little nook and cranny, every little thing that, the bird flew and chirped. I don't need to know that if I'm telling a story. So it definitely helped me become a cleaner writer, more succinct. Pay attention to the details. I think there was, when I was in college and I was in script writing, there was something where they used to say, you got to learn to kill your darlings. Something may mean something to you, but as you're going through your drafts and your understanding, even though there's a word or a line or something that you really love, no matter how much you may love that may not be as important to telling the story as, you want it to be. So you have to learn how to go through something and say, what, this is just not important. This is taking up too much time. This is insignificant. Let's just figure out how to do that.
I love that pepper, not flood. But it's, that cleanliness that you talk about, because of the constraints of timing, that it's got to be efficient. We've talked about a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if there's 24 frames a second, every second of film or TV is 24,000 words that you as a writer get to choose from. So you've got to be decisive.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do.
Where would you like audio description to go based on your dream world? Anything's possible.
I'd love it to go everywhere. And it's not just for job security. There's so many different people that use it and so many different people that need it for so many different things. I think it helps, whether it's the mom that is catching up on something and she's running around the house and she's cleaning and she's doing something and she missed a detail, whether it is someone who has always wanted to be included in family hour of watching their favorite TV show or a movie, but they feel excluded because they don't have the sense of sight that is sharp. It brings the people in. I went to a drive-through movie theater, the makeshift drive-through movie theater, a couple of weeks ago, because we're in quarantine and we were finally allowed to be out, but we were in our cars and they showed a movie and the audio description was on. And oh my gosh, what a help that was for somebody whose, car is all the way in the back and, kids are screaming all around. I needed that extra to help me go from the start of the movie to the end. There are so many people that rely on this. Someone very near and dear to me had a stroke several years ago, and his depth perception is off. So he is now able to go in and enjoy a movie in a movie theater when he puts the headphones on, because it helps him understand what is happening with what he may have a hard time seeing, or he may not be able to recognize a face on the screen. But once that audio description is being given to him, he is now able to follow along. Teachers can use this. Kids who have sensory issues or may have a hard time seeing or paying attention, that can help in schools. There are so many different things where audio description could be such an important and necessary tool that can help. I think it's such an amazing tool, and it should be everywhere.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audiences?
Yes. Here's so this is really something kind of cute and cool that happened last night. My daughter is 7, and when my daughter was 3 years old, I flew out to Burbank and I voiced a kids show. I did it, and 4 years later, it's something that was always near and dear to my heart. But my daughter is sitting on the couch, and I'm just, kind of cleaning up, and she's got my phone, and she's, on the kids setting for the streaming network. And I'm just kind of in my head, and I'm thinking of things, and she just looks up and she says, "What did you say?" And I looked up and I was like, "Oh God, was I talking? No, I didn't say anything." And she goes, "Oh." And about 30 seconds later, she goes, "Mommy, what did you say? Why did you say that?" And I just kind of walked in, and the kitchen is close to the living room. And I said, "Baby, I don't know." And I heard, all of a sudden I hear in the background on my phone, I hear my voice go, "She smiled." And I was like, "Oh my God." It's like, no, baby, that's my voice. I was like, "This is so cool. Mommy's voice is, I did this when you were 3 years old." And she's kind of like looking at me. She's like, "You wrote this? Like what?" And she's trying to understand it, because she knows what her mom does to an extent, but she's a young 7 years old. But, after I, kind of like sat down and, my moment, I was like, my baby recognizes my work. This is amazing. But it was, I sat down and I was trying to explain to her. And I think I kind of, Mommy narrates, and this was a show that I did, and you were a little girl, you were 3 years old, and it was the summer, and you were home with Daddy, and he had you in the pool, but I was on a plane and I was recording this, and this is something that I did, and the character reminded me of you, so it's especially special. And she just looked up at me with like these big eyes, and she says, "I love that your voice is on my favorite show." And I was just like, oh my gosh, it was just the sweetest. And it was personally like one of the coolest things. And I was just like, oh, I'm cool. My daughter thinks I'm cool. That was just something really special. Another thing that I just wanted to touch on, if it's okay, my grandmother, who was literally my other half, had macular degeneration in her eyes. And she used to say that it was like looking out of a window that had a broken pane. And she had such a hard time where she couldn't focus on things, or she couldn't see things. So she would often not participate in conversations because she felt like she couldn't see things or hear things, or kind of, she was a few steps behind. And there were a lot of times where you would say, "Hey, Grandma, do you want to watch this show?" And she'd say, "I want to watch this." And it was something that she'd known or seen, since the 80s or 90s. And we used to think, oh, maybe it's just that she doesn't like the TV shows of today, but it's something that she knew, and she knew the characters, and she already knew the setup of the set of the TV show. But when audio description was introduced to her, she was able to expand her horizons and feel like she was included in what she was watching. And she felt like she was able to enjoy something again without feeling like she was left out of the important details. And I just think that is so special, to be able to see somebody kind of feel like they're being welcomed back into the conversation with something like audio description. People don't realize how important it is, because, we don't talk about it. Sometimes we don't credit the talent. We don't talk about it as much as we would talk about other things that people voice, like, audiobooks. Everybody knows audiobooks, everybody loves audiobooks, but now as audio description is gaining speed, it's so important for so many different reasons. And you may not realize what it does, but it opens so many doors and it makes people feel included again. And I just love that that is something as an industry that we are able to give to people. I don't know, it's just something that it's just near and dear to my heart.
How can people follow you either on social media or otherwise?
Toni Gannon on Twitter. It's ToniGannon.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.